All right, let's get into our next discussion now. With more than 75% of imports and exports passing through the seaports, the ports represents a vital aspect of the Nigerian economy.
Yes, indeed. Now, since its establishment in 1954, the NPA has been playing its role of managing the nation's seaports and enhancing revenue yield for the federal government. Well, today on TVC Breakfast, it is our pleasure to introduce to you the Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, Hadiza Balarabe. Good morning and thanks for
nice
joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
But of course, she became the first female Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority in July 2016, and that is exactly 1 year ago.
All right. It will also interest you to know that her appointment sparked a wave of criticism initially, notably directed at her perceived lack of competence in the maritime sector. But within the short spell in the organization, she showed a firm grasp of almost everything that has to do with the operational activities of NPA.
And we call that on assumption of office. She toured port facilities across the country and promised to initiate far-reaching reforms that include a review of port concession agreement, debt recovery plan, and improvement in towage services, among others. It's good to have you again, like we noted earlier. Now, first off, let's even deviate a little before we get into our questions. Why is it that when people hear the name Hadiza Bala-Usman, they get jittery? What is it about you that seems to put you on the same pedestal as people like late Dora Akunyili? And
well, I think it's to do with being forthright, knowing your onions, and not being afraid to take on any institutional challenge that you meet. I think the Nigerian public are not comfortable with a person that comes on with not having any entrenched interest, but focusing on prioritizing the national interest of Nigeria as foremost in every of their activity as a public servant.
All right, it is 1 year now since your appointment. When you got in, you had goals, you had targets of what you want to achieve. Have you delivered on some of the promises you made at the time of your taking office?
My tenure is a 5-year tenure. This is year 1. We've been able to achieve a significant level of success within the 1 year. We've been able to define, for example, our debt recovery plan. We've identified our debt that we're seeking guidance on how to write off some of our debt, because these are bad debt that are historic and some of the entities no longer exist. So we've defined a mechanism of obtaining necessary approvals to write off some of this debt. And a portion of the debt we've assigned, we're looking at debt recovery to enable us recover all our funds. So with that, regarding debt recovery, we've defined the mechanism of obtaining the necessary approvals, and we're actively pursuing that. We've also entrenched transparency in our operations. We have signed on to budget transparency. We have also put in place our tariff in the public domain. Historically, the Nigerian ports did not have their tariff displayed for the public, but we've put it up in our website. We've taken advertorials in the newspaper to bring about transparency in our operations, demystify government procedures, which helps to remove patronage, as it were, by government officials.
That's quite interesting to know. But paint a picture for us, the level of rot that really was in the system before you took over. I mean, corruption is one word that has been associated with the NPA, and lack of transparency, you know, that you've talked about. How bad was it?
Well, it's not just Nigerian Ports Authority, just to be clear. Government agencies across the country have several levels of corruption. What we have seen is we have third-party agreements with Nigerian ports and third-party companies, whereby the contract agreements are in certain extent skewed in favor of the third party. You have payments being made over the years. We have non-compliance of certain government policies. We have situations where our officers are put in situations where they sign off agreements that are not in the best interest of Nigerians and Nigerian citizenry. So this is fundamentally where we found a lot of the compromises. We have looked to review some of these agreements. We've had agreements that are open-ended, that do not have a timeline for expiration, where Nigerian Ports Authority, for example, is renting a craft and it doesn't say when it ends. It's an ongoing and open-ended contract. So there are several layers of such, which are fundamentally where we've identified areas of corruption. We've also noted areas of revenue leakages. We recently launched our revenue invoicing management system for provisional and final billing. This is an additional step to enable us have all our payments done electronically.
Okay.
All right, let's get
interesting.
Yeah, really interesting to know. But let's get into the issue. One of the very obvious phenomenon on that area is the issue of road, the dilapidation of roads. The Ijora axis, the mile 2, the entry and the exit points and all of that. Now, the repairs were supposed to start 7th of July, but that deadline couldn't be met. But tell us about what's going on when it comes to the road repairs on there and how you intend to manage the traffic issues when the constructions actually start.
Yes, as you're aware, the road approaching the ports, our roads are managed by the Federal Ministry of Power Works and Housing. They're on their purview. The Nigerian ports is not indeed mandated to be involved in any way, but we've reached out to the Federal Ministry of Works and we've collaborated. For now, the wharf road reconstruction is being done partly funded by MPA. And this is really not our primary responsibility. We're not required to fund it. But we felt that it's very critical, it's important, it's an access road that is an eyesore to the gateway of Nigeria's economy. So we reached out and provided 1.8 billion naira to fund the full reconstruction. Ministry of Works is supervising and other private entities, Dangote Flour Mill, are providing contribution, but Nigerian Ports Authority is the highest contributor. Just to reiterate, it's not our responsibility, but we felt it's important. We reach out and collaborate and deploy resources wherever we understand priority.
But there were troubling reports that Dangote, for example, and even flour mills were not allowed to intervene. What can you tell us about that? Are they still fully on board?
We've signed off the memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
Dangote flour mills are part of it. There's a team that has all of us with the construction company working on alternative routes to enable the wharf road construction. So even with the alternative routes, we have to do palliative works on these alternative routes to enable them be navigable. So we plead with the persons and businesses in the Apapa area. We plead with them to understand and assist us as we seek towards reconstruction of the wharf road in the first instance. We're also looking to see what can be done with Liverpool, Coconut Bridge, Tinkan Island access road in itself. We're working with the Ministry of Works. Beyond just the Lagos access roads, we're also looking to do all port access roads, putting them up in one basket and discussing with Ministry of Works on how we can, within number of years, address and fund for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of all port access roads.
But beyond the Lagos port, there's a lot of pressure on the Lagos port.
Yes.
Are you doing anything to begin to look at other ports, like the Eastern Port, for example, to ease there's pressure on the Lagos port?
Just as I mentioned, regarding port access roads, we're doing like a basket of all of the port access roads and working on reconstructing them. In terms of traffic, the maritime business is you decide where you want to, is a cargo destination of choice. People determine where they want their cargo to go. And primarily the reason why you define the destination of your cargo is access to your final destination, to the extent that some of your cargo, the raw materials might be consumed within the Lagos-Ogun State Economic Corridor. You might be taking your cargo up to the north. The transportation network that takes you from the port to the final destination of cargo is primarily what determines the location where your cargo arrives into the country. The eastern ports, for example, Calabar Port is the closest port to the northeast, north central part of the country and northeast. But the road leading out of Calabar to the north central, the bridge is unable to permit the movement of containers. We have
so
also drawn the attention.
Pressure is still going to be
the
here.
pressure is still, we've written to the Federal Ministry of Power Works and Housing to deploy infrastructure to make that bridge accessible to trucks. That way we have Calabar Port being seen as a destination if you want to import or export cargo, primary destination of the north central and the northeast part of the country. In addition, as you mentioned, we're looking to sustain dredging works in the eastern ports. For example, in Calabar ports, our drafts are not deep enough. We have a channel management company that is not performing optimally. We have concerns. We're looking to obtain necessary approvals to enable us to institute a channel management company or dredging works in Calabar within the next few months.
Okay. Let's talk about the executive order on the operation of the ports. It clearly spells out the do's and the don'ts and so on. It looks beautiful. But in operation itself, what could likely be the challenges in operating or executing the executive order? Yeah,
there's an executive order for 24-hour port operations in Apapa Port. That is functional, it is taken off. We have 24-hour port operations in Apapa ports right now. The Nigerian ports and all other agencies of government deploy to the Apapa port 24 hours. What we need to ensure is we need to have the agents coming and clearing the cargo outside of the normal 9 to 5 time period. We have not seen tremendous activity within the, I would say, off-peak period of after 5 p.m. We are discussing with the agents. They've raised concerns about the security of their cargo as they leave the ports at night. They've expressed concerns about the roads to the extent that the roads are very challenging in daytime and they'll become more challenging during the night. So we're working with them to address it.
Okay, now last year you actually promised to work with professionals in the maritime sector to make the ports more competitive and attractive. It's out there that the Lome Port, Ghana and the rest of them are actually more, you know, Nigerian importers would rather use those ports than the Lagos ports. What exactly are you doing to actually make the Lagos ports more attractive?
We're looking at various areas, but importantly, when you determine those people that take their cargoes to neighboring countries are usually cargoes that individuals are trying to smuggle into the country, because it's quite difficult to smuggle through the seaports. You have, for example, vehicles. Nigeria now has an automotive policy which reduces and puts on tariffs for importation of vehicles. So people now import their cars to neighboring countries and try to smuggle them through the land borders. Primarily, quite a significant amount of the cargo being diverted is attributable to cargo that is going to be smuggled to our land borders.
Because of the port charges here in Lagos, you hear about the demurrage operations and of course the corruption and all of that that's going on. Is that not why the average importer would go to Togo?
There is an element of operational efficiencies that we're looking to improve, but significantly is to do with the ease of smuggling through the land borders of certain items that have high tariffs in the Nigerian ports. We've also noted that Nigerian ports, we need to deploy the national single windows, we need to automate our operations, we need to deploy efficient scanning services that would make our operations faster. We've concluded on deploying the national single windows, we've concluded on the operational framework. Myself and the CG Customs have chaired a committee that has developed that. We're looking to have the approval being sought at Federal Executive Council within the next few weeks, so that these are one of the fundamental challenges in terms of efficiencies for the Nigerian ports, where you have huge amount of human intervention for cargoes that come into the country. But when you deploy full scanning operations, you deploy national single windows, you would remove all of that and have an efficient process. So we hope to deploy that by the end of this year to enable us reach that pinnacle of achievement as a port.
All right, let's get into this other topic that has got so many Nigerians concerned about what's going on. The feud between the NPA and Intel. People say it's a lot of politics. It's politically motivated in the first place. What's your take on this?
Well, I wouldn't want to say there's a feud between NPA and Intels. Intels is a concessionaire of our terminals. Intels is a service provider for the Nigerian Ports Authority. One of the things that we've obtained a presidential approval which removes monopoly of oil and gas cargo. Historically, within certain period, you had a situation where cargoes for oil and gas are terminated in certain ports, certain terminals. So the president has approved that there would not be any more monopoly. Every terminal is permitted to receive oil and gas cargo. And indeed, at the point of concessioning, there was no terminology, there was no classification or categorization known as the oil and gas cargo. From the onset, there was nothing like that. Within the period of the concession, we had several approvals and unapprovals by historic governments that instituted that monopoly. But within the period of the concession, we had several approvals and unapprovals by historic governments that instituted that monopoly. But in totality, the removal of the monopoly is for the benefit of Nigeria as a whole. It reduces the cost of oil exploration in the country. It allows every entity that operates in the oil and gas industry to determine where they want to take their cargo.
How challenging really has it been for you? I don't want to bring the woman angle to it, but have there been any attempts to actually intimidate you as far as the fight against corruption within the Ports Authority is concerned? And of course, there was this face-off between you and the National Assembly on the issue of the dredging of the seaports. What can you tell us about that, and how is that going?
We have, I wouldn't allow myself to be intimidated. My personality doesn't permit that. There has been circumstances where people have threatened me, and I've confronted them and made them understand that I will not be intimidated or cowed by anyone. And I think that's very clear in the industry now. I cannot be intimidated. Regarding the National Assembly, the investigation, I welcome the investigation. And for me, it's beyond investigation, is also determining, if you identify a problem, how are you solving it? Beyond just saying there is a problem. I had identified that we do have high cost of dredging in our ports. And I've put in place a mechanism defining a consultancy service that will bring about dredging optimization. Is a study that would determine how our siltation rates are, a full bathymetric survey that would institute the basis with which we do our dredging, and the outcome of the study would guide our dredging works and would significantly reduce the cost. So when the Senate passed a resolution for investigation, I said, oh, I welcome the investigation and I'm happy you're investigating, but I have gone beyond investigation. I've put in place mechanism to address the concern. So I await their coming to our offices for the investigation, and we'll take it from there.
And we hear it's not only the National Assembly that's investigating your activities. The Presidency too is said to be looking at your activities at the port. How true is that?
We have not received any such. I have not received any letter from the presidency on any form of investigation. I've had meetings with the acting president several times. I was at the presidency last week, this week actually, and there's no such investigation from the presidency. But as I said, our operations are transparent. We welcome anyone that wants to come and look in the process of looking at our operations. There could be areas where you could further guide us on how we can streamline and optimize our transparency.
All right, still talking about the presidency and the National Assembly, we hear reports sometimes that there's some level of interferences sometimes, especially when some people have interest as to what is coming into the country. What kind of, are there any kind of political interferences here and there you receive sometimes from the political class and all of that?
No, I do not have any interference from political class. I do not have any such from executive arm to the legislative arm. They've been quite supportive. I've not experienced that.
All right, now Rotimi Amechi, the transport minister, was quoted as saying that Nigerian ports cannot be world-class overnight. Would you say that he's on the same page with you on your vision for Nigerian ports? Or what exactly is the situation with that? Because when he says it's not going to, get to that standard overnight, what does it mean to you?
It means it's a work in progress. We need to work to attain it. It's not something that you wave a wand and the Nigerian ports become 100% efficient. It's a process, and what's important is starting the process, having the timelines, and following through to achieve it within a certain period. We are in sync with the Honorable Minister of Transportation. He provides us with all the support we require in improving on our efficiencies in the ports.
All right, when it comes to being the busiest port, maybe Durban in South Africa, maybe the busiest on the African continent. But in the hub where we find ourselves, Nigeria seems to be central. But when you match the vision, that vision where you want the ports to be, how close to the vision are you?
We're not yet close to the vision, but we are taking huge steps in achieving that vision. One of the huge steps, as I mentioned, is the single windows. That automation is very critical for us. We're also reviewing our concession agreements, which would bring in place a new regime with the terminal operators, where certain development plans will be required for them to deploy and improve efficiency within our ports. So we are taking steps, and we'll be taking some huge steps within 2017 that will enable us match up and indeed be the leaders and a dominant player within the
How challenging would it be really, since for example the issue of the access roads, it's not in the 2017 budget. How do you plan to actually fund it? Of course, you talked about the collaboration between the NPA and all of that, but going forward, to what extent do you think you can actually fix this problem?
We have, in our budget, the authority has budget for reconstruction of roads and contributing towards any Federal Ministry of Works project. Ministry of Works also has a certain amount of money in their budget, I think 7 billion naira for the Tinkan Island Express Road. That will start off certain amount of work in 2017. So we have budgetary provision for those. Okay.
I have some figures here that I want to reel out to you very quickly. Cargo clearing time. Nigeria, 19 to 20 days. Lome, 3 days. Cotonou, 7 days. Durban, 4 days. Kenya, 6 days. So, what are you doing to actually close this gap? Because the difference is quite...
Yeah. We are, one of the executive orders is to have a single point of interface by all agencies of government, so you do not have dual processes of inspections and examination. That would start off on the 18th of July. We're going to unveil the framework with which we're going to have a one-stop location. Some of the things that hinder our achieving that target is to do with having different agencies of government inspecting and checking the cargo at different point. So having that would improve on our operations. We also believe that agencies of government need to be more efficient in deploying their officers, ensuring that they are on the ground to do their services.
When it comes to efficiency and effectiveness, that vision you were talking about earlier on, what is your target at the end of the day as to how much you want the NPA to generate per annum and how many cargo should come in per day, as the case may be?
We have our revenue target for 2017, 250 billion naira. For the period within January to May, we've been able to reach our target. Our target for that quarter was 116 billion. We made 117 billion naira within that quarter. So we are on target in terms of our revenue projections. On cargo coming in, a significant, our cargo is tied to policy positions of the government that sort of prevent exportation, as it were. We're also making concise effort to improve on the exportation. We believe that the Nigerian market is huge. We have agri-produce, and we have worked with our terminal operators to have priority consideration for the exportation of agricultural and solid minerals from our respective ports. So when our containers come leaving the country, they will not be going empty. We are strengthening that tie. But another important thing is with ports is the connection to the hinterland in terms of importation and exportation. We need to work on intermodal transportation system to have cargo coming inflow and outflow of the ports being seamless. Because if no matter what you do, if your cargo comes in and it doesn't get to your destination, it's not successful for you, which is why to a certain extent you have people take their products to Lome and then journey to Niger, journey to the Katsina, Niger, and bring them in through that land border. But if we have rail, we are hopeful. The Ministry of Transportation is concluding the concessioning with General Electric, and they'll deploy rail infrastructure to our ports. We're also seeking on how we can improve on the transportation through the inland waterways. That way we can have a dual intermodal transportation system. We cannot rely on only road for the evacuation of cargo. It's not efficient. That's why our roads are in a very bad situation. So all of that cargo that comes into the country goes literally by road.
So how frustrating really is it with a poor infrastructure and slow ratification of some fiscal policies? How frustrating is it for your vision to actually turn around the the operations of the ports?
It gets very frustrating in certain times, but we need to look beyond the frustration and see how we can achieve our success within the environment that exists.
All right, we are short for time now, but let me ask you this question before we leave. What basic legacy would you like people to remember you for? What would you leave behind as the Director General of the NPA?
I would like to have transparency entrenched in our operations. I would like to see us improve on our operational efficiencies.
I know Mike said that was the last question, but do you still
that's the last question.
Do you still live in the boys' quarters at 50 Alexander?
Not at all.
No, you don't.
I've gotten a house now.
You have a house
Yes,
now.
they were gracious enough to grant me a period to live in the boys' quarters.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, I lived there for a while. I've gotten a premise now.
All right.
But I appreciate DSS for allowing me to stay there for the period.
Oh, great. Director General, Nigeria Ports Authority, Hadiza Bala-Usman, thank you very much for spending your morning with us. Thank you.
Thank you for
so
having
very
me.
much.
It's a pleasure to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Right.